I've been working on a lot of these big datas, and my view on healthcare research, how big data analytics play an important role. So the big question is, can we measure everything in health? Because in health, there are so many data points, so many things we are collecting. The answer is yes, definitely we can measure, but the problem is it's a massive unstructured data. We need to make it a more structured data to try to analyze it a bit more. And we have to be careful what we are wishing for, what you want to analyze. And there comes the big data analytic pipelines. And that's important that, and I'm sure all of you, many of you are working on genomics and many other big data. This is something you must realize, that not everything can be used for clinical care. It's already there, and we know that weather forecast, we know what will happen next 10 days, 30 days. It's all big data coming from the various satellites. We do know that. And it has been gradually now going. So this all started by the various industrial revolutions. So we were the first revolution of mechanization, where steam engine and mechanical production was important. That's still the early 19th century. And then we had mass production. The aim was that we produce more, and there was industrial revolution. Electricity, division of labor was more. And then there was automation till 20th century, where global production networks, the electronics and information technology was dominating. And now we have robotization, and we have this cyber physical systems giving a value add. So we are seeing over a period of time how at present the big data plays an important role. And it's all been possible because of AI. And this slide I took from one of my colleagues, Daniel Ting from Singapore, who showed very nicely how from 50s till 2010, artificial intelligence, the machine learning programs, and then comes the deep learning. And now we know that it is in all of our data analytics, all these things have come. And thanks to the godfathers, the three who were given the Turing Award. And I was looking at the article, the first article, which was nearly more than 40,000 times quoted. These are the gentlemen who made this workshop possible today. So big data, again, very traditionally, lot of V's. It's big in terms of the size of data, the speed of data generation, the type of data, the correctness, trustfulness, and also constant changing nature of data. We'll see one by one these things. And healthcare data, again, Watson Health, they came out with this figures that the data generated from exogenous sources is 60%. We have 30% of genomic data. The clinical source data, which we believe is the maximum, but it's actually 10%. We generate about 1 terabyte per lifetime data. So you are looking at, this is one individual data, and like this, we have millions and millions of people. In perspective, it has role in biology, in imaging, clinical care, and public health. All perspective, all of them, we use these big data methods and techniques and come out with our answers. And really the application saw a big leap. We could see that how big data analytics is really helping in COVID-19, and really everything, starting from diagnosis, from estimating or predicting the risk scores, healthcare decision-making, and even pharmaceutical. It accelerated the development of drugs, development of vaccines. So we have seen the application of big data in a big way in COVID. And this was again, one slide which I really took from one of my friend. Every country, many of the countries, I'm happy to see India in nearly all of this, starting from screening, contact tracing, the quarantine compliance, health resource tracking, public administration, tracking the spread, the clinical research, which drug is good, or drug repurposing, or clinical management and screening. Everywhere the real application of big data analysis was there. Broadly, the big data analytics and healthcare research is divided into descriptive analytics, where we try to understand the historical trend of the disease, or predictive analysis, where we try to forecast the future, what will happen, what would be the prediction as far as disease occurrence or a complication occurrence is concerned. Prescriptive analysis, newer strategies to treat, and there are certain discovery analytics trying to determine what to explore next. And these are the various healthcare data analytic tools. I'm sure all of you would be much more familiar than what I am. Many ML tools or health information exchange, blockchain networks, cloud computing, and AI tools. Still, I say in medicine, the older ways are still good. Still, the epidemiological studies, the clinical trials are the highest level of evidences which are there. Though we heard in the last talk that these trials can be replaced by digital twins as far as epidemiology is concerned, but in medicine, still the evidence which is generated by these methods still hold true. But I'm sure with newer data analytics, big data collection, the real-time data, as Dr. Anurag rightly said, now we do look at that many times. The clinical trial data is more of a very controlled environment, and in real life, we don't see that controlled environment. So especially in retina, we have these anti-VEGF drugs, which I was mentioning yesterday, where we give injections. Lots and lots of trials are there. And a postgraduate is really now perturbed reading so many mnemonics of these trials. They are pretty good. But when you translate it to medical real life data, we analyzed recently, they say that for diabetic macular edema, to reduce the swelling, you need to give at least 5 injections in a year. At Shankar Nethralaya, we have our EMR, and we looked into our analytics, hardly 2, less than 2, 1.2 injections in a year. But people don't become blind. They are still surviving. Our outcomes are as good as those 5 or 6 in the clinical trial. So it becomes important to look at these real world data too. Regarding ophthalmology, where I'm an ophthalmologist, so there are a lot of sources of big data. We have the EMR database. As I had mentioned, the eye is very much amenable to imaging. So there are a lot of imaging databases. The hospital management system database. South Korea has been very much proactive as far as insurance databases are concerned, because the whole country is insured. If you look at their major publications, they all come from the insurance database, and they've been trying to extract data from the insurance thing. The molecular diagnostic platform. Registries are good, but however, for disease registries in India, except for cancer, I think not many of them have very well developed. Diabetes registries are there, they have NCD clinics, but they are not that great registries to be used to generate the big data. Again, in ophthalmology, now newer devices are coming. We have smart devices like the continuous monitoring. We have contact lenses which can measure IOP. These are smart contact lens, 3D scans. Still, some machines, they have those old printouts which are there. They are not digitized, but they are also important source. You need to look for a longitudinal data. We've been working with companies to try to digitize those information, the omics data and EMR definitely. Shankar Nethralaya EMR was one of the oldest EMR. We became totally paperless by 2010. And our EMR has been developed in collaboration with TCS. And so there was a whole team. That was a time where I had become a consultant, like associate professor in my department, and we had a whole team from TCS residing at Shankar Nethralaya for 2 years. And it was a very specific. So though looks to be a small part, but we have 12 subspecialties, and each of these are taken care in this EMR. So we use this. I'll give one example. This was looking at more than 100,000 vitrectomies. It's a surgery which we do for many of the retina conditions. Very rare, but sometimes patient can get endophthalmitis, infection in the eye after vitrectomy. We were looking at this type of a data from our EMR, and these are the results. So these are the patients who lose vision, and They need further management to try to prevent this infection. I will not go in details, but we could also look at trends, the various organisms which were implicated. So that's one example of using EMR data set. There are a couple of examples of using imaging big data. So one of the advantage which we had when we worked with Google, we had a huge set of images already there with a ground truth which was available. Same was true partly with Aravind Eye Institute too. And we could work on this nearly 128,000 images of people with diabetes to predict diabetic retinopathy, presence of retinopathy. Not go in detail on what was the result. So how to start a big data research project? I think very important is to identify the right question. It should not be like, I want to just look into, give me your EMR data and I'll churn some data out of it. That's a wrong concept. Identify the right data, the right partner, especially from the clinical side. Definitely, I would like to work with a technical partner, understand the right concepts, and there are always think that what would be the right enabler, implementation and commercialization team. Many times, like I'll give you example of the Google thing came out with a product called as ARDA. Now, the last part was not taken care. So still not those very, a person asked and I was telling some of the camera companies have incorporated that in their device, but the way I was visualizing that this can transform diabetic retinopathy screening never happened. We could do it successfully in Thailand because Thailand, as I told you, it was a national target and they had inbuilt diabetic, they had a systematic screening program. India doesn't have. So the implementation, if you start from when you have a problem, think of like down the line, this product is ready, then what? I think if you don't think that from starting, you'll end up in, so they ended up commercializing the gender part, which Anand Rajendran yesterday asked. So they could not commercialize the retinopathy, but the one from the retinal images finding gender is now used, it is commercialized. So try to look at a right question, definitely clinical unmet need, diabetic retinopathy screening or tuberculosis. Tuberculosis, I'm not an expert like Dr. Anurag, but I always believed tuberculosis is a very difficult thing to diagnose. Nobody knows such a protean manifestation. During MBBS, my friends used to tell that tuberculosis can present with anything except pregnancy. So that's how every part of the body can get involved with tuberculosis, and diagnosing it itself is a big challenge to a clinician. And one way like diabetic, the AI and this big data can help is a uniform, clear-cut diagnosis of tuberculosis. That itself is a little problem, I believe. Mammograms definitely is another place where it can play a role, and it has started playing role. The market size, looking at a very rare diagnostic equipment and trying to make something out of it may not be a good thing to look at. Common imaging test, common conditions is something we should look at, which affects more people. A good literature review and see how your question, if you answer it, can value add to the existing knowledge. Right data in terms of a data access, extraction, the size, the type of data, a good diversity should be there. Important is the data cleaning. Many times when you get this data, you definitely need to look into the outliers and many other things. And definitely like yesterday was really a good talk about the data security, the ethics. I never could think that even this age and these are identifiers, because we always put only the images, the name of the individual, but I think a lot of learning which I had looking at that. So you need right partners. It's, as I told, it's not like we have these data sets, I'll give it to you and you churn out what you can get out of it. Usually what we do is we have the clinical team and the technical team regular meetings. The clinical team should explain the clinical unmet need. See, it's important to understand the disease. One thing which I have realized, the data scientist, engineering community, very quick to grasp the problem. but you need to really explain in detail. The medical terminologies, they should be very clear. The clinical workflow, how it is, and what is the intended use environment you will have at the end. Even patients. So we had, when we did this Google study, even after that, when we did the bits, we had a lot of patient interviews. We wanted to understand that what would be the end user using it would feel like if this changes. Technical team should explain about the technical methods they will use, understand the clinical data sets from the clinical team, and then purpose the technical methods and explain about the outputs to the clinic. Because there is also many times this crosstalk which doesn't happen, and then you end up in a product or a final thing which is not very useful. Should use the right concepts and right methods, a good clinical and operational flow, appropriate training, testing, and validation data sets. And yesterday, Dr. Anurag rightly said, it's not from the same data set, have independent. So that should be planned before, not at the end of the study. So like now, one of the study which we have done, it's again part of a multicentric from China. And then we have the validation partner, we are one of them. So that was planned. It is again a deep AI and deep learning AI and chat GPT combined thing, a very nice concept, but it was planned from day one that we'll be doing these validation studies. Now, identify the appropriate techniques which can be used, appropriate operating threshold which you want to have, and validate it using the robust statistical analysis tools which were discussed yesterday. Always try to list down the limitation and caveats of these algorithms. Again, this is not a ground truth that every time this will work for ophthalmology, retinal images, whether you are dealing with image data alone or you are having clinical data, or it's a genetic data, or it's a multimodal imaging data, it will vary. It's not one method, but important is asking the right question and getting the right answers. So there are many dimensions of asking these questions. And one of it is like the first dimension, a very simple thing, what and when was the last surgical procedure, or what was the latest? So it's a very simple test, simple questions. You don't need much processing in them. A simple search engine, probably good coding. You don't need a big data to get answer, individual patient level data. In the second dimension, you want to have a linked data. Like if there is a question the administration is asking for a medication cost, utilization by the physician, you need two data sets to be linked, and then these have to be mapped using appropriate extraction methods. It's nearly a big data if you want to look at a hospital level data. A more complex where there is some level of uncertainty and that requires more of a human judgment, like prediction models, looking at risk factors, like in a population-based study, you want to find out the risk factors for progression of a disease in a cohort. Now that's a little larger data and needs more statistical tools, more big data analytic tools, a more advanced setting, or it's like we really don't know the answer. Like it's what are the unknown drivers for a rising health cost? A very vague question, but we know that there are certain multiple inputs would be needed. And finally, we can think of getting an answer using these data mining techniques. Again, example of the same, what type of dimensions, what would be the query, and what type of data would be used in these dimensions. A lot of challenges, definitely infrastructure, IT issues, and I feel that is one of the reason why collaboration started. Because one institute cannot really make all the things best, so you need to collaborate more. There's limited access of a well-curated data set for validation locally and internationally. There are lots and lots of data, but it's poorly captured, it's not labeled, so it becomes waste. And that task, so we thought of labeling all our angiogram data. That's a big task by itself. Now, currently, we have a big data project funded by DBT with MV Diabetes and Shakkaretralaya. So we had to employ 9 graders. They have been doing for last 3 years, individual lesion marking. So that's a big task by itself. So that's a lot of work. Interoperability is definitely, as Dr. Anurag was telling, is a big issue. It's not only on EMR imaging data like OCT machines. We have so many, and none of them, even we cannot extract a same format of, we want one format of, it's in an XML file, you want a DICOM, you cannot extract that, it's a company proprietary. However, our Indian minds are very sharp. So there are people who can, the engineering world, I have friends who have tried solving many of these mysteries, but it becomes a problem. Data security, privacy is definitely a big issue. Sometimes I feel if your intention is clear, this issue becomes less. Many times what the worry is the data, the intent of use of data. You have made, like I always say that we use the intent of use of data was diabetic retinopathy, and you start looking at gender. Gender is still a very thing, or you start looking cardiovascular health. That becomes again a privacy issue because consent was taken for one and you're trying to look for other. Or there is a broad consent which takes that this data would be used for any research purpose. It's a different thing. Regulatory approvals, those have now come in India, and I think that is again a challenge, especially in the West, it is a challenge more. So this was recently a meeting which I attended, and this was a nice a poster which talks about all the large publicly available data sets in ophthalmology. And I thought that I should make this, I'll send these slides. So I think all of you can capture nearly about 150 open databases in ophthalmology. And that would be really very useful for all of you to work on this. It's on all imaging devices which are there. So this is the list of databases. So this was actually a meta-analysis using all the databases, how good these databases are. So to conclude, big data analytics in healthcare is very much there, and it's been starting from a prescription, from profiling, prevention, predictive, and ultimately aiming for a precision personalized treatment. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yes, any questions? Yes.
A clinic available?
Available opens?
Yeah, in some statistic or a summary statistic.
First question is what data?
Yeah, any data.
EMR is huge. We have a data of more than every day we see 2,500 patients. So it's a big data. Now it depends, like diabetic retinopathy data, many of that is open source available now, especially the retinal image data, OCT data, piecemeal, some of that is available depending on your study question. Like I've been working on an entity called as epiretinal membranes. So those OCT images we worked, and PLOS ONE, we have put it in it got published, it's in a public repository. So data is huge. EMR data is not public. You cannot have these data like patient data to be put publicly available.
So you actually mentioned Nigam Shah, who we had invited, but then he couldn't make it. He, as you said, works on this EHR based, this green button.
I have just noted down all details of it with Dr. Anurag told. Went to the Stanford site. And
it was Anurag who mentioned him and not you.
Yeah, he told. Yeah. I went to the site and looked into, because this is interesting that if I have a EMR page, one patient, and I have a capture similar cases, that is something which is very good. So immediately I went to his site and saw his website. Great work he has been doing.
Yes. Anyway, so relating to the last question, but maybe it's a question also for Anurag, since you mentioned this public, I forget what it's called, but this digital ID for ensuring, for linking payments and identity and healthcare and so on. So EHRs in you've had one in Shankara for 10 years now, or 15 years, and probably Apollo and so many others have their own EHRs. I think what Nigam Shah is doing is, EHR in the state of California or in the entire country of the US. Is there any proposal to link these private corporate EHRs, not make it publicly available, but make it maybe queryable to authorized health providers, that kind of thing?
In ophthalmology field, I can tell you, so we are like in South India, North, not many, but South India, we have LV Prasada Institute, Shankanetralaya, Arvind. So we have formed all of them. So we were first. After that, Arvind started their EMR about 5 years back, and now LVP also 2-3 years is having their own EMR. So we have been trying to work together so that we can because this would be a huge data of all three together. Unfortunately, they don't talk to each other. The way the data is captured is also different. We are trying to find out commonalities and trying to extract some good evidence from there.
I guess just a general comment. Yeah.
I can add a bit to that. So if you look at the various presentations of the Ministry of IT and National Health Authority over the last few years, in the beginning, the idea was what you said. Create a system where using some common ID, and you know how we started with the health ID for everyone derived from the Aadhaar, everybody who signed into CoWIN. But then that ran into some trouble that was abandoned, and the idea was hash the data, bring to a central point, and make it available for research and use. Generally, it is now felt that even such use of de-identified data, and Nikki gave a great talk on this yesterday, is probably not a good idea to centralize all the data in one place. It is better to leave data where it is. So the latest talks now speak about incentives for hospitals to make themselves open to federated learnings. Problem that is going to come is a universal structure. So I see that as a plan that again will change. But the general intent is there between the National Health Authority, particularly from Dr. R.S. Sharma's time, to the new leadership that is yet to take place, that we must make this kind of data available across the nation. That idea is there. How to implement it is the big challenge.
I think one of the reason why research, I don't think was the primary concern they had, because that would come the last. But the main important thing is patient will have his own data across, because he doesn't every time comes here, he'll go one time to one hospital, second time to other. And doctors have a chance, if he gives a consent, to look at his old records too when he's treating.
In fact, the new data privacy bill puts that as one of the rights of the patient.
Correct.
To always have access to their data and to make changes to it and ask for corrections. That's written in the new data privacy bill.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, maybe I can just add from our own experience in the Western Cape in South Africa with our health information exchange. It's also designed to be for continuity of care. And so we really grappled with the privacy and protection of patient information, especially under our new Act for Protection of Personal Information. But I don't know if you remember, yesterday I had the responsible party and the different roles. And under legal sort of consultation, it was decided that actually the responsible party is the whole Department of Health that provides the healthcare. So it's not that you have one doctor who is responsible for your care, but it's actually the purpose of healthcare is undertaken by the Department of Health as a responsible party. And that helped for us to be able to do the linkage across the whole province from the different sets, because the responsible party didn't change. It remained this overarching responsible party. So we do have a manuscript in preparation describing our governance infrastructure and how we manage all these questions for our health exchange. So hopefully that will be out in the next couple of months or so.
So one of the concepts which you told yesterday, I was thinking we are actually doing it. We have not put a word to it, the third party thing which you had told. So like this project via DBT, it's MV Diabetes and Shankanetralaya are the clinical partners. We have Indian Statistical Institute, Calcutta, NIT Durgapur, and VIT Chennai as technical partners. There are 5 organizations. and each one needing a separate set of data set, each have different questions. The two clinical sites are the ones who are curating the data. There also, there is an issue of data privacy. So we have a third party in Bangalore. All the 5 have a MOU with him, that agency, and his work is like de-identification is done at the site. But once the data comes, which data should go where and who should have what access is all governed by a third party. So I think that is a good way, even in India, managing this type of big data. So really here it's looking at data of nearly 5 lakh patients across 2 hospitals. So a third party definitely serves that purpose. Everybody is worried that my data he will capture, NIT will take our data. So I think if there is a centralized agency who maps where the thing should channel, it helps a lot.
Okay. Any other questions? So let's thank Rajiv again for a very interesting 2 talks today. Thank you for coming all the way. And we'll have, I think lunch will be ready probably at 1, but you can have an early poster session or you can relax, and we'll meet again at 2.